Hey, it's Sylvia. You won't believe what happened to me. My dad banned me from my own beach house and screamed for me to leave, just like he always did. But then the bank called and everything changed. The truth hit harder than I ever imagined. After everything I'd lost, this was the twist I never saw coming. What happens when you finally realize your family is the real enemy? I didn't just take back what was mine. I exposed the lies they buried. But this is only the beginning. Hook 2. You think you know betrayal? My father kicked me out of my own home. My brother stood there, watching it happen, and just when I thought there was nothing left, the bank called me the owner. The house that once felt like my prison was now my victory. But the truth, it's worse than I ever imagined. I thought it was over, but now, the real fight begins. What happens when the empire you've spent your life trying to destroy comes crashing down? Final combined. Hook. Hey, it's Sylvia. My dad banned me from my own beach house, screamed at me to leave. But when the bank called, everything changed. I thought I was out, but turns out they were the ones in the dark. What happens when you're thrown out, only to realize you've been holding the keys to their downfall all along? The real battle was never about the house. It was about reclaiming everything they tried to take from me. But it doesn't end here. What comes next will leave them begging for mercy. It was a late afternoon when I finally drove up to the beach house, the one I had worked so hard for, the one that was supposed to be my refuge, my sanctuary away from the chaos of family life. The golden hour bathed the coastline in a soft, warm light as the sun sank toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. I rolled down the windows, letting the salt air rush in, filling my lungs with the scent of the ocean. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this light, this free. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend, one where I could finally relax, clear my mind, and maybe start figuring out what I really wanted from my life. The beach house stood at the edge of the cliff, just as I had left it, untouched by time. I stepped out of the car, grabbing my bag, and I could feel my heart race with anticipation. There was something comforting about this place, something that had always made me feel like it was mine, truly mine. But as I walked toward the front door, the sense of calm I had expected quickly evaporated. The door swung open before I could even knock, and there stood Caspian, my father. His face was twisted in a mix of anger and something I couldn't quite place. His eyes locked on mine with a fury I hadn't seen in years. "What are you doing here?" he barked. His voice was sharp, as if my presence in that house was a personal affront. "Dad, What do you mean? I live here, remember?" I stammered, feeling the ground beneath me shift. I had just arrived, and already, this was the reception I was getting. "You're not welcome here," he said, his words cutting through the air like a blade. "This house is for the family, not for freeloaders like you. You're a parasite." The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, my mind struggling to comprehend the venom in his voice. My heart raced, confusion setting in, then a sharp pang of hurt that quickly morphed into something deeper, anger. This was my house, my hard work, yet here he was, telling me I didn't belong. I turned toward Dexter, hoping for some support, some sign that this wasn't real. But instead, he stood there, his expression uncomfortable, barely acknowledging me as he fiddled with his phone. "Dad's right," he muttered, his voice flat, indifferent. "This house was always about the family." I felt my stomach drop as his words sank in. He wasn't just siding with Dad, he was validating the cruelty of it all. The harsh truth hit me like a wave. My family was never going to see me as one of them, not truly. I tried to explain. I tried to say that I had bought this house with my own money, that it was mine just as much as it was theirs. But my words fell on deaf ears. Caspian's glare remained unwavering, and Dexter went back to scrolling through his phone as though nothing was happening. No, the indifference of the others in the room was just as suffocating. I stood there, my heart hammering in my chest, feeling like an outsider in my own home. "This is my place," I said quietly, but there was no fight left in me. Not yet. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, hearing the door slam behind me as I stepped out into the cool evening air. The sun was almost gone now, leaving only a faint glow in the sky, and the ocean whispered its constant lullaby. I walked to my car, my hand shaking as I gripped the door handle. It felt like a lifetime before I got in, slamming the door shut behind me. I sat there for a moment, staring at the empty road ahead. Anger bubbled up inside me, replacing the hurt. My father's words, the way he had rejected me, the way my brother had dismissed me, it wasn't just about the house. It was about everything. Years of being the invisible one, the one who always tried but was never good enough. Tears stung my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not here, not now. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway, my mind already spinning with thoughts of what to do next. I couldn't just let this go. I picked up my phone, dialing my lawyer's number. He answered on the first ring. "I need your help," I said, my voice steady, determined. "We're going to make sure they never do this to me again." I hung up and grabbed my real estate agent's number, calling them next. My mind was racing now. This wasn't just about getting back at them. This was about taking back control. They didn't own me. They never had. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do next, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I drove through the quiet streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The wind from the open windows did nothing to cool the fire inside me. I had just been humiliated by my own father in the place I thought I belonged. I could still hear his words echoing in my head, calling me a parasite. It was like a slap to the face, and the worst part was that he truly believed it. I couldn't just let this go. This wasn't just about the house. It was about everything. All the years I had spent trying to prove myself, trying to belong to this family, only to have it all thrown in my face. I wasn't a parasite. I was the one who had worked hard, sacrificed, and bought this place with my own money. I pulled into the parking lot of the nearest lawyer's office, feeling a sense of urgency. I wasn't sure what my next move would be, but I was done being passive. I was done letting them push me around. I called my lawyer as I stepped out of the car. "David, it's Sylvia. I need to meet with you. Now." The line crackled as he answered, his voice calm but professional. "What's going on, Sylvia?" I took a deep breath before answering. "My father is trying to take the beach house away from me. He's making some legal moves to override my ownership rights. I need you to help me." David paused, then spoke with quiet determination. "I'll make some calls. We'll meet tomorrow. Don't do anything rash. We'll get to the bottom of this." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, David." As I hung up, a sense of resolve began to take root in me. I wasn't going to let them take what was mine. I had worked too hard for this. The anger I had been suppressing started to build, each beat of my heart reminding me of the injustice I was facing. The drive back to my apartment was slow, the weight of everything pressing down on me, the family that had never truly seen me, the betrayal that felt like a dagger to the heart. I hadn't realized how much I had been carrying until now, but now it was impossible to ignore. I parked the car and stepped out, still feeling the tension in my shoulders. My apartment was small, cozy in its own way. It wasn't the beach house, but it was mine. I hadn't felt this exhausted in years, but there was no time for rest. I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Inside, I sat on the couch, still with my coat on, and stared out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, but they felt distant, disconnected from the storm inside me. I was angry, yes, but beneath that, there was something else, a deep, aching loneliness. I had spent so many years trying to be accepted, trying to fit into a family that never truly accepted me. I closed my eyes, and the memories came flooding back. Times when I had been pushed aside, when my opinions didn't matter, when I was never quite good enough. The moments when my father would make decisions without consulting me, when my brother would dismiss my thoughts like they didn't even matter. The feeling of being an outsider in my own family had been with me for as long as I could remember. I remembered one particular moment from my childhood, one that stuck with me more than the others. It was when I had been excluded from a major family decision, one that I had been looking forward to. I was barely a teenager, and I had worked hard to save up for something that would have meant a lot to me, a family vacation. But when it came time to decide, my father made the decision without even asking me. I had tried to voice my disappointment, but it was as if I wasn't even there. That day, I realized something. I would never truly belong to them. The realization hit me hard. It wasn't just about the beach house. It was about the years of being disregarded, the years of trying to prove myself, trying to show my family that I was worth something. But no matter how hard I tried, I was always on the outside looking in. It hurt, but it also lit a fire inside me. I wasn't going to let them take this from me. Not again. The next morning, I met with my lawyer at a coffee shop. The place was quiet, the gentle hum of the espresso machine in the background. I was barely able to concentrate on what he was saying, though. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened the day before, about how my father had already made moves to strip me of my rights. David's voice broke through my thoughts. Your father has already contacted the bank. He's trying to transfer ownership of the house, claiming that your contract is invalid. This is going to be a tough fight, Sylvia. The words hit me like a punch. I had expected some resistance, but not this. I hadn't realized just how far my father would go to take away something that was rightfully mine. I could feel the betrayal deepening, the weight of it pressing down on me. David continued, his voice steady. This is going to be a long, difficult legal battle, but I'll fight for you. We'll make sure your rights are protected. We just need to gather evidence. I nodded, but the sting of betrayal was still fresh. The idea of fighting my own father in court seemed surreal, but there was no turning back now. This wasn't just about the beach house anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my sense of self. I left the coffee shop, my mind racing. The more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I wasn't going to let my father, or anyone, take away what I had worked for. I couldn't go back to being that helpless girl who had always been pushed aside. Back at my apartment, I sat at my desk, legal papers spread out in front of me. I was preparing for battle. As I reviewed the documents, I found myself feeling more in control, more capable. I would fight for this. I would fight for everything that had been taken from me. And then, just as I was about to make another call, I found it, a hidden clause in my father's will, one that complicated everything. It wasn't just about inheritance, it was about control. The revelation hit me like a jolt, the magnitude of it sinking in. This battle wasn't just about property, it was about my very identity. I stared at the document, my mind whirling. This was bigger than I ever imagined. My father's legacy wasn't just about inheritance, it was a battle for everything I had ever wanted, for my place in this world, for my right to exist on my own terms. I sat in my apartment, the soft hum of the city filtering through the windows, but it couldn't drown out the chaos inside my head. It had been a full day since the call with David, my lawyer, and I could still feel the sting of betrayal, like a fresh wound that wouldn't heal. I had been trying so hard to ignore it, to focus on the plan, but the weight of it all was suffocating. I thought back to the confrontation with my father. His words echoed in my mind, each one like a slap across my face. The house wasn't mine. It was never mine. My own father, the man I had worked so hard to impress, had just erased me from the equation. He had already made moves behind my back to transfer ownership, to strip me of everything I had worked for. The tears that I had been holding back all night began to well up, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't going to cry. Not anymore. I took a shaky breath and stood up, pacing the room. The tightness in my chest was almost unbearable. I wanted to scream, but there was no point. No one would listen. Not now. What was the point in fighting? Was it worth it? Was all this pain, all this effort, worth it? The question lingered in the air, heavy, suffocating, and for a moment, just a moment, I considered giving up. But then, like a sudden flash of light, I remembered something from my childhood, a time when I had been knocked down, ignored, and pushed aside. Yet, I had always stood back up. I'd never been one to give up. I was a fighter. I had always been. I clenched my fists, the anger flooding through me once more. No, I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I wiped the tears from my eyes, my mind sharp with clarity. It wasn't just about the beach house. It was about everything. Every single time I had been dismissed, every moment my family had made me feel small, unworthy of their attention or respect. This was my turning point. I was done being their doormat. I was done being invisible. With a deep breath, I reached for my phone and dialed David's number. The call rang once, then twice before he answered. Sylvia? His voice was calm, but I could hear the urgency in it. What's going on? I need to talk to you, I said, my voice tight. I'm coming over. I ended the call and grabbed my coat. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to fight this alone. The drive to David's office was a blur. My thoughts raced as I navigated the streets, but the anger, the frustration, the overwhelming need to do something kept me going. I couldn't afford to waste time. I needed to take control back. When I arrived at his office, David was waiting for me, a serious look on his face. He knew this was getting real. Sylvia, he said as I walked in, we've got a problem. Tell me about it, I snapped. My father's already gone behind my back. He's transferred the beach house into his name. He's trying to erase me from the picture, and I'm not going to let him get away with it. David raised an eyebrow, his expression softening. He's good at playing dirty, but there's still hope. We can fight this. We just need to move quickly. I'm done waiting, I replied, my voice steady. What's the next step? David leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. We can still challenge the transfer, but we need proof that the contract was valid. We need to find a way to expose his actions. I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't going to let my father win. Not like this. Not again. Later that day, I returned to the beach house. The place that had once been my sanctuary now felt like an adversary. The house, once full of memories, seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with its silence. I stood at the door for a moment, taking in the sight of it. The house still looked the same, its warm, sunlit windows, the ocean breeze drifting in through the open door. But everything had changed. My family, my father, had turned this place into a battlefield. I walked inside, my footsteps heavy as I made my way toward the living room. Caspian was sitting on the couch, his eyes narrowing as he saw me enter. Dexter was lounging nearby, his face as unreadable as always. I stood there, staring at my father, trying to mask the hurt I felt. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice low but steady. Caspian didn't even flinch. He just looked at me, his gaze cold. This house was never yours, Sylvia, he said, his voice as emotionless as ever. I could feel the walls closing in around me. The anger bubbled up inside, but I kept my voice calm. You took everything from me without even asking. How can you justify this? I demanded. This was always meant to be passed down to me, Caspian said, his voice flat. You don't get to dictate what happens here. My heart raced, but I kept my composure. I wasn't going to let him break me. I'll expose you. I'll go public. Everyone will know what you've done. Caspian's eyes flickered for a second, but he quickly regained his cold demeanor. Go ahead. I've got nothing to hide. I turned and walked out, the sting of his words still fresh. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I wasn't going to let him destroy me. That night, I sat at my desk, the papers spread out in front of me. My mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. I called David again, and this time, I was ready. I'm going to take him down, I said. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he's done. This ends now. David's voice was steady. We'll fight. But it won't be easy. We need to be strategic. The press, the legal system. It's all going to take time. I don't care, I said, my voice firm. I'm not going down without a fight. As I hung up the phone, I realized just how far I was willing to go. This was no longer about the house. It was about reclaiming my life. And I was prepared to do whatever it took to make sure I didn't lose. I woke up early the next morning, my eyes tired, but my mind wide awake. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale light across my apartment. I sat at my desk, staring at the scattered legal papers and notes from my lawyer's office. The weight of it all sat heavy in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about everything my father had taken from me over the years. The city buzzed outside my window, life moving forward. But for me, time had come to a standstill. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertainty gnawing at me. What if I lost? What if he won this battle too? I couldn't let that happen. Not after everything. I dialed David's number, the lawyer who had been guiding me through this nightmare. I needed confirmation that I was making the right decision. "David," I said, my voice calm but tinged with determination. "I want to file the papers today. I want this in the public eye." "Are you sure?" David's voice was low, cautious. "This isn't something we can take back. Once the press gets involved, it's out of your hands." "I don't care," I replied. "I need to do this. I need to fight back. I'm not going to let him just take everything from me." I felt the quiet urgency in David's silence before he spoke again. "All right, we'll move forward. But Sylvia, your father's not someone you can easily beat. He's got connections in high places. It's going to be harder than you think." I exhaled sharply, the reality of what I was about to do sinking in. But I didn't flinch. "I'm not backing down, David. I'm not giving him the satisfaction of watching me crumble." "All right," he said. "We'll do it your way." I hung up, my pulse quickening. I was ready to take this fight to the next level. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was my chance to take back control. The beach house wasn't the only thing I had to reclaim. It was my dignity, my self-respect. Hours later, I found myself at my desk, drafting the press release. The words seemed to flow, each sentence building the case against my father and his underhanded actions. I didn't care anymore if it hurt him. I didn't care if it embarrassed him. He had stolen enough from me, and it was time to expose him for who he really was. I stared at the computer screen for a long moment. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. Just as I was about to finish typing, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I clicked on it, my heart racing. The message was short, but the words hit me like a punch in the gut. "You're making a huge mistake. Back off, or there will be consequences. You won't win this." The message was from one of my father's business associates. The familiar name jumped out at me, someone I had seen in the background of my father's life. The threat was clear. They knew where I was going with this, and they wanted me to stop. But there was no going back. I had already made up my mind. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and preparations. David was right. This fight was going to be harder than I ever imagined. But I was ready. If my father thought he could scare me into submission, he had another thing coming. I met David at a small cafe later that evening, the weight of the situation pressing on my chest. The coffee shop was busy, but the conversation between David and me felt like a world apart. I couldn't shake the feeling that every moment was getting more intense. "You're sure about this?" David asked again, his voice heavy with concern. "I've never been more sure," I said, my voice low but unwavering. "He can't just take what's mine. I'm not going to let him." David nodded, but there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. "Your father's associates have been circling. They're going to pressure you, Sylvia. I've seen how they operate. They don't take kindly to someone stepping out of line." "I don't care," I said, my voice sharp. "They can pressure me all they want, but I won't back down." Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another message. I didn't need to check the number to know who it was from. My father's lawyer. "You have one last chance to drop this case," the message read. "If you don't, we'll make sure your name is dragged through the mud. No one will believe you." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a war. David noticed the look on my face and leaned in. "What's going on?" "They're trying to intimidate me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "They're threatening me. They think they can scare me into submission. But they're wrong." David's eyes hardened. "This is getting serious, Sylvia. They'll stop at nothing." I stared at my phone for a moment, the weight of the ultimatum sinking in. "I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever." As I left the cafe, the reality of the situation settled over me like a cold blanket. This was the fight of my life, and I couldn't turn back now. Back at my apartment, I paced the living room, the pressure mounting with each step. My mind raced as I thought about what had happened, about what was to come. I could feel my nerves starting to fray, the doubt creeping in. Was this really worth it? Was I willing to lose everything just to prove a point? Then a memory flashed in my mind, one from when I was a little girl. I remembered standing up to my father for the first time, refusing to let him push me around. I had been so small, so powerless, but I had refused to back down. And in that moment, I realized something. I had always been strong. I had always fought for what was right, even when it seemed impossible. I stopped pacing and stood still for a moment, letting the realization sink in. This fight wasn't just about a house, it was about me. It was about reclaiming the strength I had always had, but had let slip away over the years. I wasn't going to lose this battle. Not now. Not ever. I knew I couldn't let him win, I whispered to myself. Not now, not after everything. But what came next, I wasn't prepared for. I sat at my desk, papers and legal files scattered around me, the weight of the fight pressing down. The late afternoon sun was sinking, casting long shadows over my apartment. It felt like the calm before a storm. I knew what I had to do, but it didn't make the task ahead any easier. My phone buzzed on the desk, and I reached for it, dialing David's number. I had to be sure I was taking the right steps. "Sylvia," David answered, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "Have you thought this through? Going public with this is going to change everything." "I know," I replied, my voice firm. "But I'm doing it. I've been silent for too long. It's time to fight back." David was silent for a moment, but I could hear the weight of his words through the phone. "All right, we'll move forward. We've got a strong case, but this will be harder than you think. Your father's got connections, Sylvia." I clenched my jaw. "I don't care. He's not getting away with this." As we ended the call, I felt my resolve harden. This wasn't just about reclaiming the beach house anymore. It was about exposing my father for who he really was, a man who had hidden his true nature for far too long. I spent the next few hours working, drafting a press release, outlining everything he had done, the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for me and my future. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore, it was personal. It was my chance to take back control, to expose him. But then my phone buzzed again. The number was unfamiliar. I opened the message, and my heart sank. "Stop before it's too late. You have no idea what you're up against. You'll regret this." I froze. The threat was clear. This wasn't just about the beach house anymore. I was being targeted. I quickly erased the message, but the weight of it hung in the air. Whoever this was, whether it was one of my father's associates or someone else, had made it clear they were watching me. I shoved the phone aside, trying to refocus, but the fear gnawed at me. I had to move forward. I couldn't back down. A few days later, I found myself sitting in a sterile courthouse, the smell of old paper and polished floors filling the air. My lawyer was beside me, and across the room, I could see my father's lawyer, cold, calculating, and ready for a fight. I didn't flinch. I had come this far. There was no turning back. I stood up as the judge entered, and for a moment, it felt like I was in a dream. The weight of the situation was crushing, but I couldn't afford to crumble. This was my moment, my only chance to get justice. The hearing was slow. The back and forth, the objections, the legal jargon, it all felt like a blur. But I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just fighting for the beach house. I was fighting for my dignity. Just as I was about to speak, I heard my father's lawyer bring up a point that stopped me cold. He was trying to discredit me, trying to undermine everything I had worked for, casting doubt on my credibility. The words stung. They cut deeper than I expected, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I stood my ground, looking the judge in the eye. This wasn't just about property, it was about power, control, and I wasn't going to let him win. After the hearing, I met with my father. The air in his office felt thick with tension, and every step I took seemed to echo in the empty space. I was prepared for confrontation, but nothing could have prepared me for the coldness in his eyes when he saw me. "You've made a mistake, Sylvia," he said, his voice cold and distant. "This was never yours to begin with." My pulse quickened, and I had to bite my lip to keep from shouting. "You took everything from me without even asking. How can you justify this?" He didn't flinch. "Because I can. This house was always meant to be mine, Sylvia. You were never part of the plan." I felt the weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. "So, this is how it's always been. You never cared about me." He didn't respond. His eyes just watched me, cold and unfeeling. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about showing him that he couldn't keep getting away with this. I was done being the victim. As I left his office, I stopped by a cafe, meeting a journalist who had agreed to hear my side of the story. I needed to take this public. I needed to let the world know what kind of man my father really was. The journalist sat across from me, her pen poised, ready to capture every word. "I've been dealing with this for years," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "My father has always treated me like I was nothing. And now he's trying to take everything I've worked for." The journalist nodded, clearly moved. "This is a story that needs to be told. I can help you." She paused before continuing. "I've done some digging. Your father isn't just doing this to you. He's been involved in other cases like this. There's a pattern of manipulation, of him getting away with things because of who he knows." The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just me. There were others. And that meant my father's reign of control wasn't as solid as he thought. "I'm not letting him get away with this," I said, more to myself than to her. "Not this time." The journalist promised to help me, and as I left the cafe, I felt a spark of hope that hadn't been there before. This wasn't just about getting my house back. It was about exposing my father's lies. It was about showing the world who he really was. I wasn't just fighting for my beach house anymore. I was fighting to expose the man I once called my father, and the world was about to find out. I stood in front of the mirror, the cool evening air drifting through the cracked window, mingling with the heat in my chest. My fists were clenched, my jaw tight, every muscle in my body rigid with barely contained fury. My reflection stared back at me, tired but resolute. I could feel the anger bubbling just beneath the surface, the tension from the last few days closing in on me. It had been too much, too long. The endless betrayal from my father, the constant undermining from my family, the weight of their lies pressing on my chest like a boulder. I had let it all slide for too long, too afraid to fight back. But not anymore. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to back down now. The phone on my desk buzzed, and I turned to pick it up, my eyes still on my reflection. It was David. I hadn't heard from him all day, but I knew what he was going to say. "You ready for this?" his voice asked, low but steady. I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." There was a pause before he responded, his voice softer now. "You're sure? This is bigger than anything we've faced so far." "I'm sure. I've come too far to stop now." The call ended, and I put the phone back on the desk, staring down at the pile of documents in front of me. Legal papers, evidence, and now a new revelation, one that could change everything. I had a chance to fight back, to take control of my life. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. I had no illusions about that. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was an anonymous message. I unlocked the phone, my heart racing. The message was short but clear. "Your father's actions? Fraudulent. We have proof." I stared at the screen, a flicker of hope sparking inside me. This was it. This was the breakthrough I needed. The betrayal had been deeper than I thought, and now, finally, I had something to use against him. I called David immediately, not bothering to waste time. "I got something," I said, the urgency in my voice unmistakable. "An anonymous message, but it's got proof about the fraud, the real estate dealings. This could be what we need." David was silent for a moment before speaking. "If it's true, this changes everything." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm going to dig deeper, but I need to meet with you. We need to start putting a plan in motion." The next day, we were sitting in a dimly lit meeting room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The city outside felt like a distant world, as though the noise of the world didn't reach us here, just the two of us, poring over the files, the financial documents that would be the key to my father's undoing. David leaned in, pointing at a page with his pen. This is the evidence we need. Your father's been involved in a massive real estate scam. He's been siphoning money through multiple shell companies. I felt a sense of disbelief wash over me. My father, the man who had once seemed invincible, the man I had tried so hard to please, was nothing but a criminal hiding behind a mask of respectability. We have him, David said, his voice firm. Now, we just need to make sure we're ready to expose it. The weight of the moment sank in. The realization that I wasn't just fighting for a beach house anymore. I was fighting to expose the man I once called my father, and that fight was going to take everything I had. But even as the plan to bring him down started to take shape, the emotional toll was becoming too much. I walked out of the office, needing air, needing space to think. The quiet street felt too quiet, the hum of the city fading into a blur. The sound of my footsteps was the only thing I could focus on as I wandered aimlessly, my thoughts a jumbled mess of anger and exhaustion. Every step felt heavier than the last. I had come so far, but at what cost? I wanted justice, but I also wanted peace. The battle was taking its toll on me, on my body, on my mind, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going like this. The weight of it all suddenly hit me like a wave. I stumbled to the side of the street, the sidewalk rough beneath my shoes. Tears burned at the edges of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't afford to break now. I needed to finish this. For me, for everything my father had taken from me. I walked back to my apartment, taking the long way home, trying to clear my head. But when I entered, my phone rang. It was Jennifer. I wasn't expecting it. The last time we spoke, things had been tense. Our family was fractured, and we both knew it. But what I wasn't expecting was the betrayal in her voice. "Sylvia," she said, her tone colder than I'd ever heard. "I've been talking to Dad. I'm just letting you know. You're not going to win this, not if you keep going. You'll lose. And I don't want to see you destroyed over this." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't believe it. My own sister, siding with him, betraying me like the rest of them. "You're siding with him?" I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. "After everything he's done? You'll never be accepted by the family if you keep this up," she continued, her voice now laced with guilt. "You've pushed everyone away. You can't fight this alone. You're making a mistake." I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking. The betrayal was deeper than I thought, but it wasn't going to stop me. I wasn't going to let Jennifer's guilt-tripping or my father's lies destroy me. I walked into my office the next morning, the first rays of sunlight coming through the window. There was a clarity in my mind that hadn't been there before. I wasn't alone. I had David. I had the journalist who was helping me expose the truth. And now, I had the evidence to bring my father down. This was it. I reached for my phone and dialed the journalist's number. "It's time," I said, my voice steady. "Let's make this public." This wasn't just about the beach house anymore. It was about everything I'd been too scared to face. And I was done being scared. I stood in front of the mirror, my reflection staring back at me, a mixture of anger and exhaustion pooling in my chest. The decision was made. There was no turning back now. Every step I'd taken had led me here, and I could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. The city outside hummed with life, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. 2 days had passed since Jennifer's betrayal, and it still stung. But it had also lit a fire inside me. I had reached the breaking point. I was done with being the pawn in their game. I was done being controlled. I could feel my pulse quicken as I grabbed the phone, dialing David's number. The plan had to be finalized today. No more waiting, no more second-guessing. It was time to end this. "David," I said when he picked up, "it's time." I could hear the hesitation in his voice, but his words were firm when he replied, "Are you sure? This is it. Once we go public, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I said, my voice unwavering. Let's finish this. As I hung up, a sense of finality settled over me. The next step was crucial. I had to be ready for the storm, and I couldn't afford to falter now. Later that morning, I met with my lawyer in a quiet cafe. The light streamed through the windows, but the air was thick with the gravity of the conversation we were having. There was no time to waste. We had the evidence, we had the support. Now we needed to act. This is it, I said as we pored over the papers. We go public tomorrow. This has to hit hard. David nodded, but I could see the weight on his face. The media will come after him, and once we release this, there's no way he can talk his way out of it. But there's something else, I said, as I glanced at the papers on the table. What about the letter we found? David's eyes flickered with understanding. That's the key. If we push this now, it could change everything. We've got leverage. The idea of using my father's history against him felt almost too easy, but it was necessary. This wasn't just about the beach house anymore. This was about exposing everything he'd done, the lies, the manipulation, the fraud. I left the cafe feeling a strange mix of hope and unease. The pieces were falling into place, but I knew I wasn't done yet. When I got back to my office, I was interrupted by a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I hesitated. But then I opened it. Standing in front of me was a distant relative, a name I hadn't heard in years. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice tight with surprise. They smiled faintly. "I think you need to hear this." The relative stepped inside, sitting down across from me. "I know what your father's been up to. He's been hiding things I was part of a long time ago. I want to help you." I didn't trust them completely, but I was willing to listen. "What kind of things?" I asked cautiously. They pulled out a stack of old documents, laying them on the table. "I was involved in a deal he made years ago, a real estate scam. He's been doing this for a long time. I can't live with the guilt anymore. I've kept this quiet, but it's time someone knew the truth." My mind raced as I flipped through the papers. There it was, proof that my father had been running a large-scale fraud operation. This could change everything. It was the leverage I needed to finally bring him down. I stood up abruptly. "Thank you," I said, trying to mask the flood of emotions crashing over me. "You've given me everything I need." The relative nodded, but their eyes were filled with regret. "I wish I could have done more sooner, but you can end this now. Expose him." I nodded, my resolve hardening. This was it. I wasn't backing down. That afternoon, I drove to my father's house. The weight of everything I was about to say hung heavy in the air, but I couldn't turn back now. I couldn't let him win, not after everything he had done. I stood at the door for a moment, gathering my thoughts before I rang the bell. When he opened the door, his face hardened at the sight of me, but I wasn't intimidated anymore. Not by him, not by any of them. "Dad," I said, stepping inside. "We need to talk." He crossed his arms, his expression cold. "What now, Sylvia?" I set the stack of papers down on the table between us. "You've been lying for years. You've manipulated everyone, and now it ends." He glanced at the documents, but then looked back at me, unfazed. "This doesn't change anything." "Oh, it does," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You can't control this anymore." I watched his face as he scanned the papers, his eyes narrowing. He tried to brush it off, but I could see the cracks in his facade. He knew it was over. "You think you can take me down?" he sneered. "You'll never win this, Sylvia. You don't have what it takes." I stood tall, my voice steady. "I'm done being your victim. This ends now." The silence between us was thick with tension, but I wasn't afraid anymore. That evening, I returned to my apartment, my heart still racing. The confrontation had left me exhausted, but there was a strange sense of peace in knowing I was finally taking control. As I sat down at my desk, the phone buzzed. It was a message from the journalist. "We're ready. The story will go live tomorrow." I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for. I had one chance to take him down, and this time, I wasn't going to miss. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the soft hum of the city beyond my window doing little to calm the storm brewing inside me. The weight of what was about to unfold pressed down on me, heavier than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't just the case or the betrayal, it was the finality of the decision ahead. The evidence I had was solid. There would be no turning back. I glanced over the documents again, letting my fingers trace the words, knowing they were about to reshape my entire life. But even with all the facts at my fingertips, the emotional cost was staggering. My father, my family, they would never be the same after this. And neither would I. Was I really ready to destroy what was left of us? The guilt gnawed at my insides, but every time I thought about backing down, the anger pushed back harder. I couldn't let him win, not again. My phone buzzed, breaking my train of thought. It was David, my lawyer. I picked up without hesitation. "Sylvia, wait," he said, his voice cautious. "I've spoken with your father's lawyer. There's an option here, a settlement. You could end this quietly." I froze, the phone heavy in my hand. A settlement? After everything? "No," I said quickly, the words tasting like acid. "No deal. It's too late for that." There was a pause on the other end, a slight exhale. "Think about it, Sylvia. This could save you a lot of pain. He's offering to walk away, and you get the house. No public fallout, no more fighting." I looked at the documents again, at the pile of papers that had become my armor in this fight. What kind of person would I be if I just took the easy way out? No, this wasn't about money or property. It was about dignity, about finally reclaiming my own life. "I'm done thinking," I said firmly. "I'm going public." David hesitated before agreeing, knowing there was no changing my mind. I could feel the shift inside me, the resolve solidifying like cement setting into place. Tomorrow, everything would change. As I stepped out of my apartment the next morning, I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. The city felt distant, almost unreal. My steps were slow, but my mind raced. There was no going back. Walking to my car, I let the cool air wash over me. I couldn't help but think of all the times my father had crushed me with his words, reminding me that I was nothing, that I was weak. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. The confrontation with my father had been the catalyst, but this was the endgame. Today would be the moment that defined everything. I arrived at the lawyer's office to finalize the last details. We'd spent days preparing for this, but now the plan was set in stone. David went over the strategy one last time, making sure I understood the stakes. "We launch in a few hours," he said, looking at me like he was waiting for me to crack. "You're sure?" I nodded, staring at the legal documents laid out in front of me. "I'm sure. Let's do it." As we left the office, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This wasn't just about my father anymore. It was about taking my life back, about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. The next few hours were a blur. Sitting at my desk, I prepared everything for the public reveal. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had the power to expose everything now. This wasn't just a story about a house or a family feud. It was the truth. The world would know the man my father really was. I clicked send. It felt like the air shifted around me, and I waited, breathless, for confirmation. The phone rang. "It's live," the journalist's voice crackled through the speaker. "It's out there." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. My heart pounded as I watched the media pick up the story. My father's empire, everything he'd built on lies, was crumbling. And I had done it. But the celebration didn't last long. My phone buzzed again. Calls, messages, threats from my father's legal team. I was ready for them. The first call was from his lawyer. They demanded I retract the story, threatening legal action. I listened calmly, my voice steady. "No," I said, closing my eyes for a moment. "I'm not retracting anything." Then came the second call. My father, his voice pleading, broken. "Please, Sylvia, we can still fix this. It doesn't have to go this far. Think of your family." I held the phone tighter, my jaw clenched. "This is what you've done, not me. You don't get to control me anymore." The call ended, And I sat there for a moment, feeling a strange calm settle over me. The storm had begun, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I turned on the television, watching as news outlets broadcast the story. My father's face appeared, his anger barely contained as he denied everything. But the cracks were showing, and the media wasn't letting up. Then, my phone rang again. Another anonymous message. This time, it was a warning. He's already working to spin the story. Don't let him control the narrative. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the battle ahead. This was just the beginning. I had won the battle, but I hadn't won the war. And I was about to face the greatest challenge of all. The mansion loomed before me, a cold, imposing structure that once held the weight of my family's legacy. Today, it felt empty, its walls echoing with memories that no longer held the same power over me. The media storm had passed, the chaos had settled, but the emotional debris still lingered in the corners of my mind. I stood there, looking at the place that had shaped so much of my life, and for the first time, I felt free. The empire my father had built, on lies, manipulation, and deceit, was crumbling. But in the wake of it, I found something unexpected: peace. I wasn't defined by this house or the man who'd once held it over my head. The anger had faded, replaced by something more complex. Relief, yes, but also sadness. The realization that this was the end of an era for me. For so long, I had been tethered to a past that I had no control over. Now, I was standing at the threshold of my own future. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I made my way back to my car. Tomorrow, the final phase of my battle would begin. But today, I allowed myself to reflect on the path that had led me here. And then, something caught my eye. A letter, buried among the pile of papers in the car. I opened it slowly, the familiar handwriting sending a chill down my spine. It was from my father, not begging for forgiveness, but something that felt almost worse, a backhanded acknowledgement. "I'm proud of your courage, Sylvia. Not many would have the guts to fight for what they believe in. But you always were stubborn. Perhaps you'll understand one day why I did what I did. You've got what you wanted. Now, I suppose you'll have to live with it." I closed my eyes, the sting of the words hitting harder than I'd expected. Pride? From him? It didn't feel like pride. It felt like another manipulation, another attempt to reclaim control from beyond the grave. But this time, I wasn't buying it. Still, the letter held something I hadn't expected. A piece of closure. And my father wasn't asking for forgiveness, and he wasn't sorry. But this was his way of saying he understood my fight, even if he never could fully accept it. The next evening, I sat by my window, looking out at the city. The world felt quiet, still, but my thoughts churned. The weight of everything I had done, everything that had happened, was finally sinking in. I had won, but in that victory, I had lost so much. The family I once knew was gone. The man I had once called my father, he was gone too. I opened the letter again, reading the words aloud to myself. "Perhaps you'll understand one day." I wasn't sure I would ever understand him, but I did know one thing: I could never go back. My past, the chains that had held me for so long, were broken. The question now was, what came next? My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was David, my lawyer. "We've got the paperwork ready," he said. "It's time to take control of what's yours." The future was waiting, but the past wasn't finished with me yet. There were still battles to fight, and as much as I wanted to move on, I knew I had to face one last hurdle: the legal battle for my father's assets. The next few days felt like a blur. I sat in David's office, reviewing the legal papers, knowing that this wasn't going to be easy. The legal teams were ready to clash, and though I had the truth on my side, I also knew that my father had left a trail of deceit that would take time to untangle. I signed the papers, my hand steady, but my heart pounding. I wasn't just signing away my father's legacy. I was signing away my past, my ties to him, and the control he once had over me. But even as I did it, I felt a surge of power. This was my moment. As we left the office, David's voice broke through my thoughts. "They're going to fight this. They'll throw everything they have at you. I didn't flinch. Let them. But then came the unexpected, an obstacle I hadn't anticipated, a last-minute challenge from my father's legal team, a technicality, they claimed, that could drag this out for months. It was a classic move, one I should have expected, but it still stung. I took a deep breath. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The weekend before the court date, I returned to the beach house, the place where it all started. I stood on the porch, the same spot where my father had once scolded me for questioning him. The waves crashed softly against the shore, the sun sinking lower into the horizon. This house, which had once been a symbol of oppression, now felt different. It felt like a place of finality, of closure. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, the things my father had touched. But it didn't hold the same power over me anymore. Then I found it. A journal, hidden away in a drawer, covered in dust. It was my mother's. As I flipped through the pages, I saw her thoughts, her musings on the family's dysfunction, the patterns, the lies, the way she had been trapped in the same web I had fought to escape. The journal didn't offer answers, but it offered insight. It helped me see my family in a new light, and with that understanding, I finally let go of the past. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I walked into my father's office for the last time. This time, there would be no fear. There would be no tears. I was no longer the scared daughter. I was the woman who had taken control of her life. The confrontation was brief but intense. My father tried to manipulate me once more, his words slick and rehearsed. But this time, I saw through him completely. "I know everything," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I'm not backing down." For the first time, my father crumbled. There were no defenses left, no excuses. He admitted to everything, his lies, his manipulations. But there was no satisfaction in hearing it. The damage had already been done. The legal battle would continue, but I knew it didn't matter anymore. I had taken back what was mine. I had taken back my life. Weeks later, I sat in my new office, looking out over the city skyline. The weight of the past was still with me, but it no longer defined me. The journey ahead was mine to shape. I had faced the demons of my past, and now the future was waiting. Then the door opened. A surprise visit, someone unexpected, and just like that, the road ahead was even more uncertain than before. I had freed myself from the past, but the future was an open road, and I didn't yet know what it held for me.